Marcus Chun wiped the grease from his hands with a worn shop rag, the familiar smell of motor oil and metal filling his nostrils. The auto repair shop had been his life for the past 8 years, ever since Sarah died, and left him to raise their daughter Emma alone. The work was honest, if not particularly lucrative, and it kept food on the table and a roof over their heads in a modest apartment above the garage. The afternoon sun slanted through the grimy windows, casting long shadows across the concrete floor where he worked on Mrs. Patterson's ancient sedan. Emma would be home from school soon, probably with another story about her day and whatever new project her teacher had assigned. At 12, she was becoming more independent, but Marcus still worried about her walking home alone through the increasingly diverse neighborhood. The bell above the shop door chimed, and Marcus looked up, expecting to see a customer. Instead, a small figure stood silhouetted against the bright doorway, hesitating as if unsure whether to enter. As his eyes adjusted, Marcus realized it wasn't human. The girl appeared to be roughly Emma's age, though it was difficult to tell with her species. Her skin had a pale blue-gray tint that seemed to shimmer slightly in the light, and her large eyes were a deep purple that reminded Marcus of twilight skies. She wore clothes that had seen better days, a threadbare jacket that was too large for her slight frame, and shoes that looked like they'd been patched multiple times. What struck Marcus most was the way she carried herself. There was a wariness in her posture, a readiness to flee that he recognized from stray animals he'd helped over the years. She clutched a small device in her hands, some kind of translator, he assumed. "Can I help you?" Marcus asked gently, setting down his wrench and moving slowly so as not to startle her. The girl's fingers moved over her device, and, after a moment, it spoke in a mechanical voice. "Seeking employment opportunity. Willing to work for minimal compensation." Marcus blinked in surprise. The universal translator made her words clear, but there was something in her posture that suggested desperation. "How old are you, kid?" 12 standard years, came the translated response. "Capable of many tasks. Quick learner. Please." The last words seemed to bypass the translator entirely, coming out in her own voice with an emotional weight that hit Marcus squarely in the chest. He'd heard that tone before, from Emma, during those first terrible months after Sarah's death, when his daughter was afraid he might leave too. "What's your name?" he asked, crouching down to her eye level. "Kira," she said, then added something in her own language that the translator rendered as "of the Melody people." Marcus had heard of the Melody. They were one of the newer refugee populations that had arrived on Earth after their homeworld had been devastated by corporate mining operations. Most humans viewed them with suspicion or outright hostility, claiming they were taking jobs and resources. The reality, Marcus knew, was far more complicated. "Where are your parents, Kira?" Her large eyes seemed to grow even larger, if that was possible. The translator remained silent for a long moment before she spoke again. "Father works 3 positions to afford shelter. Mother became sick on journey to Earth. No longer with us." Marcus felt his heart clench. The girl was essentially an orphan, trying to help support herself and her father. In a way, her situation reminded him of his own struggles after Sarah's death, though at least he'd had some savings and a business to fall back on. "I don't really have any paying work right now," he said carefully, watching her face fall. "But I could use some help organizing the shop. Sorting bolts, keeping track of inventory. It's not glamorous work, but I could pay you a little, and there's always food upstairs if you're hungry." The transformation in Kira's expression was remarkable. Hope flickered in those purple eyes like a flame catching kindling. "You would do this? For me?" "Sure, kid. Everyone needs a helping hand sometimes." That afternoon, Marcus learned that Kira was remarkably intelligent and had an intuitive understanding of how things worked. She organized his chaotic parts inventory with an efficiency that impressed him, creating a system that made sense even to his cluttered mind. More importantly, she seemed to genuinely enjoy the work, humming something under her breath as she sorted screws and cataloged air filters. When Emma arrived home from school, She stopped short at the sight of Kira and kneeling beside a box of spark plugs. Marcus watched nervously as his daughter took in the alien girl's appearance, hoping Emma had inherited his sense of compassion along with Sarah's stubborn streak. "Dad," Emma said carefully. "Who's this?" "This is Kira," Marcus said. "She's helping me organize the shop." Emma studied Kira for a moment, then seemed to make a decision. "Cool. I'm Emma. Do you go to Roosevelt Middle School? I haven't seen you there." Kira looked up from her work, translator in hand. After a moment, the device spoke. "I do attend Roosevelt Middle School. I'm typically not noticed." Something in the translated words made Emma frown. "What do you mean?" Kira hesitated, her fingers moving over the translator's interface. "Many students find my presence uncomfortable. I eat lunch alone. I sit alone in classes. It is acceptable." But Marcus could see from Emma's expression that it was definitely not acceptable to his daughter. Emma had inherited her mother's fierce sense of justice, and the idea of anyone being deliberately ignored or excluded was anathema to her. "Well, that's stupid," Emma declared. "Tomorrow you can sit with me and my friends at lunch." "Right, Dad?" Marcus nodded, though he worried about potential complications. Emma's school had a mixed track record when it came to integrating refugee children, and he didn't want Kira to become a target for harassment. But he also knew better than to argue with his daughter when she'd made up her mind about something. Over the following weeks, Kira became a regular presence in the shop. She arrived each afternoon with an eagerness that reminded Marcus why he'd loved working with his hands in the first place. She had an uncanny ability to anticipate what tools he needed and seemed to understand mechanical systems intuitively, even though her species came from a world with very different technology. More importantly, she and Emma had become fast friends. The language barrier proved to be less of an obstacle than Marcus had expected. Emma had always been good at reading people's emotions, and Kira's expressions were remarkably human-like despite their different species. They communicated through a combination of the translator, gestures, and the universal language of shared interests. Emma had also been true to her word about lunch. According to both girls, Kira now sat at Emma's table with her small group of friends, though Marcus suspected it hadn't been entirely smooth sailing. Emma had come home a few times with reports of jerks being jerks, but she'd handled it with the same determination she applied to everything else. What surprised Marcus most was how much Kira had changed in just a few weeks. The wariness was still there, but it had been tempered by something that looked remarkably like hope. She smiled more often, and sometimes Marcus caught her humming those melodies while she worked, complex, haunting tunes that seemed to tell stories even without words. It was during one of these humming sessions that Emma made a discovery that would change everything. "Kira," Emma said one afternoon as they both worked on organizing a shipment of brake pads. "That song you're humming, it's really pretty. What's it about?" Kira's hand stilled, and for a moment Marcus thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, the translator rendered her words with unusual precision. "It is a song of my people, a story song about the great forests of our homeworld before the machines came. My mother taught it to me when I was very small." Emma leaned forward, genuinely interested. "Can you sing the whole thing?" "I could," Kira said hesitantly, "but it is very long, and the translator cannot capture the true meaning of the words." "That's okay," Emma said. "I'd still like to hear it." What followed was 15 minutes of the most beautiful music Marcus had ever heard. Kira's voice was unlike anything human. It had a quality that seemed to resonate in his bones, harmonies that shouldn't have been possible with a single voice, but somehow were. The melody wove through complex progressions that told a story even without understanding the words. It spoke of loss and longing, of beauty destroyed and memories cherished, of hope persisting in the face of despair. When she finished, both Marcus and Emma sat in stunned silence. Emma's eyes were bright with unshed tears, and Marcus felt something tight in his chest that he hadn't experienced since Sarah's funeral. "Kira," Emma said softly, that was incredible. You have to sing that for other people." But Kira shook her head quickly. the wariness returning to her expression. No, the song is not for human ears. Humans do not appreciate melody music. That's crazy, Emma protested. Dad, tell her how amazing that was. Marcus was still trying to find words adequate to describe what he'd just experienced. Kira, that was one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard. Emma's right. People would love to hear you sing. But Kira continued, shaking her head. You are kind, but you do not understand. Melody voices are different. What is beautiful to us sounds strange to most humans. I have learned it is better to remain silent. The sadness in her translated words made Marcus angry. Not at Kira, but at whatever circumstances had taught a 12-year-old girl that her natural gift was something to be hidden and ashamed of. He thought of all the times humans had dismissed alien cultures as inferior or alien art as worthless, and felt a familiar surge of protective instinct. Who told you that? He asked gently. Kira's fingers moved nervously over her translator. Teachers, other students, adults on the street. They say melody music hurts human ears, that it is noise pollution. There have been laws proposed. Marcus felt his anger growing. He'd heard about those proposed laws, thinly veiled attempts to further marginalize refugee populations by targeting their cultural expressions. The fact that they were affecting a child's willingness to share something so beautiful made his blood boil. Well, they're wrong, he said firmly. What you just shared with us was not noise, it was art. Real art. And anyone who can't appreciate that is missing out on something special. Emma nodded enthusiastically. You should sing at the school talent show next month. Everyone would be amazed. But this suggestion seemed to terrify Kira more than anything else they discussed. She actually took a step backward, her purple eyes wide with what looked like panic. No, she said, her own voice breaking through without the translator. Please no. They would laugh. Or worse. The pain in her voice was so raw that Marcus immediately wanted to gather her up in a protective hug, the same way he would if Emma were hurting. Instead, he crouched down to her, eye level again. Kira, has someone hurt you? At school, she was quiet for a long time, her small hands gripping the translator so tightly her knuckles showed white through her blue-gray skin. Finally, she spoke. Last year, in my previous school, some students convinced me to sing during lunch period. They said they wanted to hear melody music. So I sang a simple children's song, something harmless and brief. She paused, her voice growing smaller. They recorded it, posted it online with mocking commentary, called it alien screeching and worse things. The video was shared thousands of times before it was taken down. Marcus felt sick. He could imagine how devastating that betrayal would be for any child, but for someone already struggling to fit into a new world, it must have been crushing. The other students at that school began making noises whenever they saw me, Kira continued. Cruel imitations of my voice. Teachers did nothing. Some laughed along. Father moved us here so I could have a fresh start. Emma looked absolutely horrified. That's awful. Those kids were complete jerks. Yes, Kira said simply. So you understand why I cannot sing in public again. It is safer to remain silent. But Marcus could see in Emma's expression that she was not going to let this stand. His daughter had the same look she'd had when she was 7 and had decided to rescue every stray cat in the neighborhood. It was a look that meant trouble for everyone who stood in the way of what she saw as justice. Those kids were idiots, Emma said with the absolute certainty that only a 12-year-old could possess. And they were wrong. Your voice is beautiful, and hiding it just lets them win. Kira looked between Emma and Marcus, clearly torn between hope and fear. Marcus could see the longing in her eyes, the desire to share her gift warring with the very real trauma of past experiences. What if? Marcus said slowly, an idea beginning to form. What if we started small? Maybe you could sing for just a few people first. People who appreciate music and understand how special what you do really is. Like who? Kira asked. Marcus thought of Mrs. Chun down at the community center who organized cultural events and had always been welcoming to newcomers. He thought of Father Rodriguez at the church Sarah used to attend, who had made a point of learning basic phrases in several alien languages. He thought of Dr. Patel at the clinic, who treated refugee families without regard for their ability to pay. "I know some people who would love to hear you sing," he said. "Good people who understand that different doesn't mean wrong. Maybe if you started there, you'd feel more confident about sharing your voice with others." Kira considered this for a long moment. "You would be there? And Emma?" "Of course," Emma said immediately. "We'd never let anyone be mean to you." Something in Kira's expression shifted. Not quite hope, but perhaps the beginning of possibility. I will think about it." That evening, after Kira had gone home to help her father with whatever small jobs he'd managed to find that day, Marcus found himself thinking about the courage it took to trust again after being betrayed. He thought about his own journey after Sarah's death, how Emma's unwavering love had eventually convinced him that it was safe to care about people again, even if it meant risking future loss. Looking at his daughter, who was already planning ways to help Kira feel more confident about her singing, Marcus felt a surge of pride. Emma was growing up to be exactly the kind of person Sarah had hoped she would become. Someone who saw injustice and refused to accept it. Someone who recognized beauty even when it came in unfamiliar forms. As he tucked Emma into bed that night, she looked up at him with serious eyes. "Dad, we're going to help her, right? Kira deserves to have people hear how amazing she is." "Yes, sweetheart," Marcus said, kissing her forehead. "We're going to help her." He just hoped they could find a way to do it without causing Kira more pain. The girl had already been through enough trauma for someone twice her age. But, looking at Emma's determined expression, Marcus suspected that his daughter wasn't going to rest until Kira's voice was heard and appreciated the way it deserved to be. The question was whether the world was ready to listen. The community center's main room smelled like coffee and the lingering traces of whatever cultural dinner had been served the night before. Marcus adjusted the folding chairs for the third time, trying to calm his nerves. It had taken 2 weeks of gentle persuasion to convince Kira to even consider this small gathering, and he was terrified that something would go wrong and set her progress back months. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor beside Kira, both girls working on homework while they waited for the small audience to arrive. Marcus had been careful about who he invited, only people he trusted completely, people who had demonstrated genuine respect for the growing alien refugee community in their neighborhood. Mrs. Chun arrived first, carrying a thermos of tea and wearing the kind of warm smile that had made her beloved at the community center for over a decade. She was followed by Father Rodriguez, who immediately struck up a conversation with Kira in her native language. Apparently, he'd been taking lessons from the local refugee assistance office. Dr. Patel came next, along with his teenage daughter Priya, who was Emma's age and shared her passion for music. Finally, Marcus's neighbor Tom arrived with his wife Janet. Tom was a retired music teacher who had spent 40 years helping kids find their voices, and Janet worked as a sign language interpreter. Both of them understood the importance of communication that transcended traditional barriers. As the small group settled into their chairs, Marcus noticed Kira's growing tension. Her hands gripped her translator device, and she kept glancing toward the exit as if calculating how quickly she could flee if necessary. "Remember," Emma whispered to her friend, "these are good people. They're here because they want to hear something beautiful." Mrs. Chun leaned forward in her chair. "Kira, Marcus tells us you have a wonderful voice. I've been looking forward to this all week." "It's been too long since I heard real music," Tom added. "The kind that comes from the heart, not from a computer." Kira looked around the circle of expectant faces, her purple eyes wide with a mixture of hope and terror. When she spoke, her voice was so quiet that her translator barely picked it up. "I am nervous. Human ears are different from melody ears. What if you do not? What if it causes discomfort?" Father Rodriguez smiled gently. "Child, I've been studying your language and culture for months now. I know that melody song stories are considered among the most sophisticated musical forms in the known galaxy. It would be an honor to experience one." This seemed to surprise Kira. "You have studied our music?" Of course, Dr. Patel chimed in. "The medical literature suggests that melody vocalizations have therapeutic properties. There are studies showing that your people's songs can actually promote healing and reduce stress in listeners, regardless of species. Marcus watched as this information sank in. It was clear that no one had ever told Kira that her people's music was valued or studied. The propaganda she'd been fed had convinced her that melody voices were nothing but noise to human ears. "What would you like to sing for us?" Mrs. Chun asked kindly. Kira hesitated, then spoke something in her own language to Father Rodriguez, who nodded encouragingly. She turned back to the group. "I will sing a song my grandmother taught me. It is about the connection between all living things. The melody shows how individual voices can become part of something larger without losing what makes them unique." She stood slowly, closing her eyes and taking several deep breaths. When she began to sing, the transformation was immediate and breathtaking. The first notes seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her throat, resonating in a way that Marcus could feel in his chest. But unlike the mournful song she'd sung in the shop, this melody was complex and layered. Kira's voice split into harmonies that shouldn't have been possible. Low, thrumming bass notes that provided a foundation, while crystalline higher registers danced above them. As the song progressed, Marcus began to understand what she meant about connection. The melody seemed to wrap around each listener individually, finding some resonance that was unique to them, while simultaneously weaving all of them together into something larger than the sum of its parts. Tom, the retired music teacher, had tears streaming down his face. Janet was signing along, though the hand movements seemed to flow more like a dance than traditional sign language. Dr. Patel sat with his eyes closed, his medical training probably allowing him to actually feel the physiological effects the song was having. But it was Priya's reaction that struck Marcus most powerfully. The teenager had pulled out her phone, not to record, but to follow along with a music composition app, her fingers flying as she tried to capture the impossible harmonies she was hearing. When the song ended, the silence stretched for almost a full minute. Kira stood with her eyes still closed, as if afraid to open them and see rejection on the faces around her. Finally, Tom spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "Kira, in 40 years of teaching music, I have never heard anything like that. The harmonic complexity alone defies everything I thought I knew about vocal performance. It was like meditation and therapy and art all rolled into one," Dr. Patel added. "I could actually feel my stress levels dropping as you sang." Priya looked up from her phone, eyes bright with excitement. "I've been trying to map the harmonic progressions, but your voice does things that shouldn't be mathematically possible. It's like you're singing in dimensions I can't even chart." Mrs. Chen wiped tears from her eyes. "Child, that was one of the most beautiful things I've ever experienced. Thank you for sharing something so precious with us." Kira finally opened her eyes, looking around the circle with something approaching wonder. You truly enjoyed it? I did not hurt your ears." "Hurt our ears?" Father Rodriguez looked genuinely confused. "Kira, that was transcendent. I understand now why your people's songs are considered sacred. There's something in them that speaks to the divine." The relief that washed over Kira's face was so profound that Marcus felt his own eyes filling with tears. This child had been carrying the weight of believing her natural gift was somehow offensive, when in reality it was extraordinary. "I want to record you," Priya said suddenly, then caught herself. "I mean, if you're comfortable with that. Not to post anywhere, just so I can study the techniques. Maybe learn from them." Kira's expression immediately became wary again. "Recording, that is how the troubles began before." Emma reached over and took her friend's hand. "But these aren't the jerks from your old school. Priya's cool, and she actually understands music. I would never share anything without your permission," Priya said earnestly. What you do is amazing, and I think it could help people. But only if you want to." Marcus watched Kira wrestle with the decision. The trust she'd built with this small group was fragile, and he knew that pushing too hard could shatter it completely. "Why don't we take it one step at a time?" he suggested. "No pressure for anything you're not ready for." But Tom had a different idea. Kira, what do you know about the Roosevelt Middle School Talent Show? Emma perked up immediately. That's next month. I already signed up to do a piano piece. I happen to know the music teacher there, Tom continued. Mrs. Williams is a good person, and she's been trying to make the school more inclusive. If she heard what we just heard. No, Kira said quickly. I cannot. Too many people, too much risk. What if it wasn't just you? Priya asked thoughtfully. What if Emma played piano while you sang? Like a collaboration? Emma's eyes lit up. That's brilliant. Kira, we could practice together. I could provide backing harmonies that complement your voice. And I could help arrange something, Tom offered. Create a musical framework that would showcase your abilities while giving you support. Marcus could see the longing in Kira's expression, but also the fear. What if they react like the students in my previous school? Mrs. Chun spoke up. Then they would be revealing their own ignorance, not your inadequacy. But I don't think that will happen. Not if the music is as powerful as what we just heard. Besides, Emma added, I'll be right there with you. Anyone who wants to be mean to you has to go through me first. Despite the seriousness of the conversation, this made several adults chuckle. Emma might be small, but her protective instincts were legendary in their neighborhood. I need to think about it, Kira said finally, and I should speak with my father. Of course, Marcus said. Take all the time you need. As the evening wound down and people began to leave, each person made sure to thank Kira personally for sharing her gift with them. Tom lingered behind, pulling Marcus aside. That girl has something special, he said quietly. I've heard professional singers who couldn't do half of what she just did naturally. But more than that, she has the gift of touching people's souls through music. That's rare at any age. I know, Marcus replied. I just want to make sure we help her without causing more trauma. The fact that you're thinking about it that way tells me she's in good hands. But, Marcus, gifts like hers need to be shared. Not for entertainment, but because the world needs beauty, especially now. Especially with all the division and fear around refugee communities. Marcus nodded, understanding what Tom meant. Kira's voice could be more than just personal healing. It could be a bridge between communities that have been taught to fear each other. Over the following week, Kira seemed lighter somehow. She still helped in the shop each afternoon, but there was a new confidence in her movements. She hummed more often, and sometimes Emma could coax her into singing short pieces while they worked. It was during one of these impromptu performances that they had an unexpected visitor. Marcus looked up from the engine he was working on to see a woman standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she said, wiping her eyes. I was walking by and I heard singing. It was the most beautiful thing. The woman introduced herself as Dr. Sarah Martinez, a music therapist who worked with trauma patients at the local hospital. She'd been having a particularly difficult day, dealing with a patient who hadn't spoken since a car accident 3 months earlier, when she heard Kira's voice drifting from the shop. I don't know what language that was, but it spoke to something deep inside me, Dr. Martinez explained. I've been working with music therapy for 15 years, and I've never heard anything that powerful. Kira had been hiding behind a display of oil filters, but Emma gently coaxed her out to meet Dr. Martinez. When the doctor realized the singer was just a child, her amazement grew even greater. Would you consider visiting the hospital sometime? Dr. Martinez asked carefully, not to perform exactly, but maybe to sing for some of my patients? I think your voice could help people heal. Marcus watched Kira's face cycle through surprise, fear, and then something that might have been purpose. My singing could help sick people? I believe it could, Dr. Martinez said. Music therapy works because certain sounds and rhythms can actually affect brain chemistry, promote healing, reduce pain, and anxiety. What you do, it's like music therapy amplified. This seemed to resonate with something deep in Kira's cultural background. Among my people, song healers are held in highest regard. It is considered a sacred calling. Because it is, Dr. Martinez said simply, you have a gift that could make a real difference in people's lives. That evening, Marcus found Kira and Emma's sitting on the front steps of the apartment, looking up at the stars. Well, the few stars that were visible through the city's light pollution. She's thinking about the hospital, Emma reported when Marcus joined them. And maybe the talent show, too. I spoke with my father last night, Kira said. I told him about the people who heard me sing, about what Dr. Martinez said. He was surprised. What did he say? Kira was quiet for a moment. He said he had forgotten that our songs were once valued. The journey here, the struggles to survive. He said it had made him forget that we brought gifts to this world, not just needs. Marcus felt his heart ache for this family who had been made to feel like burdens rather than the valuable additions to the community they truly were. He also said, Kira continued, that my mother would have wanted me to sing. She believed that hiding our light makes the universe a dimmer place. Emma reached over and squeezed her friend's hand. Your mom was right. I think, Kira said slowly, I would like to try singing at the hospital first. If it helps people, then perhaps I could be brave enough for the talent show. Marcus smiled. That sounds like a good plan. We'll take it one step at a time. As they sat there in comfortable silence, Marcus reflected on how much had changed in just a few weeks. A frightened, desperate child had become a confident young person who was beginning to understand her own worth. More than that, she was starting to see herself not as a burden to be hidden, but as someone with something valuable to offer. It made him think about the broader implications of what was happening. How many other refugee families were hiding their talents, their knowledge, their cultural gifts because they'd been made to feel unwelcome. How much was humanity missing out on by treating newcomers as problems rather than resources? Watching Kira trace constellations with her finger, Marcus made a silent promise. Whatever happened with the hospital visits or the talent show, he would make sure this remarkable girl knew that her voice mattered, that her culture had value, and that she had a place in this world not despite her differences, but because of them. The universe, as her mother had said, needed all the light it could get. The pediatric ward of St. Mary's Hospital had been designed to be as welcoming as possible, with bright colors and cheerful murals covering the walls. But Marcus could still feel the underlying current of sadness that permeated any place where children fought serious illnesses. He walked beside Dr. Martinez through the corridors, with Kira and Emma following close behind. I've spoken with the staff about what we're hoping to accomplish, Dr. Martinez explained quietly. Everyone's very excited, but I want to manage expectations. Some of our patients are quite fragile, both physically and emotionally. Kira nodded solemnly, clutching a small bag that contained her translator and some sheet music that Tom had helped her transcribe. Over the past 2 weeks, she had been working with him to understand how her natural abilities could be adapted for therapeutic purposes. I have prepared 3 different songs, she said through her translator. One for calming anxiety, one for promoting healing sleep, and one for hope. Tom helped me understand which vocal frequencies would be most beneficial. Marcus felt a swell of pride. In the short time since the community center gathering, Kira had thrown herself into understanding the science behind her abilities with the same intensity she brought to organizing his workshop. She had read everything Dr. Martinez had shared about music therapy, consulted with Dr. Patel about the physiological effects of her singing, and spent hours practicing with Tom to refine her technique. Their first stop was the room of 8-year-old Miguel, who had been in the hospital for 2 months following a severe car accident. According to Dr. Martinez, he had withdrawn completely, refusing to speak to anyone and showing little interest in the world around him. Miguel's mother, Rosa, looked up from her bedside chair as they entered. The exhaustion in her face told the story of weeks spent maintaining hope in an impossible situation. Miguel, Dr. Martinez said gently, I brought some friends to visit you. This is Kira, and she has something special she'd like to share, if that's okay. The boy didn't respond, but he did turn his head slightly toward them. Kira approached the bed slowly, moving with the careful deliberation Marcus had noticed she used around anything fragile. Hello, Miguel, she said, her own voice breaking through without the translator. I would like to sing for you if you don't mind. It is a song about brave children who overcome difficult journeys. Miguel's eyes focused on her with what might have been curiosity. Kira began to sing, and the effect was immediate. The melody was gentle but complex, starting with notes that seemed to wrap around the room like a warm blanket. As the song progressed, Marcus could actually see Miguel's body relaxing, the tension leaving his small shoulders for the first time since they'd entered the room. But more than that, something was happening to the boy's face. The blank, withdrawn expression was being replaced by something Marcus could only describe as wonder. Miguel's eyes were tracking the impossible harmonies that Kira produced, as if he were watching something beautiful dance in the air above his bed. When she finished, the silence stretched for nearly a minute. Then, Miguel did something that made his mother gasp. He smiled. "Bonita," he whispered. "Beautiful." Rosa began to cry, covering her mouth with her hands. Dr. Martinez was furiously scribbling notes, but Marcus could see the amazement in her expression. "Would you like to hear another song?" Kira asked gently. Miguel nodded eagerly, and this time when she sang, he began to hum along with the simpler melodic lines. It was the first sound he'd made in weeks that wasn't related to medical necessity. Their visit to the pediatric ward lasted 3 hours. They stopped in 6 different rooms, and in each one, Kira's singing produced profound effects. A teenage girl with severe depression sat up in bed for the first time in days. A boy undergoing chemotherapy stopped vomiting and actually asked for food. 2 children in the trauma unit fell asleep peacefully for the first time since their accidents. But it was their final stop that affected Marcus most deeply. In the NICU, they visited premature babies whose development had been compromised by various complications. Dr. Martinez had arranged for Kira to sing in the central area, where her voice could reach multiple incubators. As Kira's lullaby filled the space, something remarkable happened. The monitors tracking the baby's vital signs began showing improvements. Heart rates stabilized, oxygen saturation increased, and several infants who had been restless settled into calm sleep. "This is unprecedented," whispered Dr. Williams, the head of the NICU. "I've never seen such immediate, measurable improvements from any intervention." Emma squeezed Marcus's hand, her own eyes bright with tears. "Dad, look what she's doing. She's actually helping them get better." As they left the hospital that afternoon, Marcus noticed a change in how Kira carried herself. The hesitant, apologetic posture was gone, replaced by something that looked remarkably like purpose. "I want to come back," she told Dr. Martinez. "Every week, if possible. Those children, they need songs. And I have many more to share." "I was hoping you'd say that," Dr. Martinez replied. "I've already spoken with the administration about creating a formal music therapy program with you as a key component. The results we saw today, the medical benefits, are undeniable." On the drive home, Kira was unusually quiet. When Marcus asked if she was okay, she looked out the window for a long moment before responding. "I think I understand now what my mother meant about light," she said. "For so long, I thought my voice was just noise that bothered people. But today I saw that it could be healing, that it could bring comfort to those who suffer." "That's a pretty heavy responsibility for someone your age," Marcus said carefully. "Yes," Kira agreed, "but it is a responsibility I want to carry. My people have a saying, 'A gift unused is a wound in the universe.' I do not want to be a wound." That evening, as Marcus was closing up the shop, he found Emma and Kira sitting together working on something that looked like a musical arrangement. Sheet music was spread across the workbench, and Emma was picking out notes on a small keyboard while Kira hummed along. "What you two working on?" "The talent show," Emma said without looking up. "We've decided we're definitely doing it." Marcus felt his stomach tighten with worry. "Are you sure? That's a much bigger audience than the hospital." "That's exactly why we have to do it," Kira said firmly. "Today I learned that my voice can heal, but it can only heal people who hear it. How many children at school are carrying pain that music could help?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. "Plus, there are other alien kids at Roosevelt who never speak up in class, never participate in anything. If they see Kira being celebrated for who she is, maybe they'll be brave enough to share their gifts too. Marcus looked at these two determined young people and felt a complex mix of pride and terror. They were absolutely right about the potential impact, but the risk of humiliation or worse was real. The Roosevelt Middle School Talent Show would be attended by hundreds of people, including parents who might not be as open-minded as the carefully selected group that had heard Kira sing at the community center. "Have you thought about what you'll do if people react badly?" he asked. Kira and Emma exchanged a look that suggested they discussed this extensively. "Tom helped us think about that," Kira said. "He reminded us that every important change requires someone to be first. Someone has to be willing to show others what's possible. Besides," Emma added, "we're not just doing this for us. We're doing it for Miguel and those babies in the NICU and all the kids who think they have to hide who they are to fit in." Marcus realized he was looking at a fundamental shift in how these girls saw themselves and their place in the world. They weren't just thinking about personal success or failure. They were thinking about their responsibility to use their gifts to make things better for others. "Okay," he said finally, "if you're both committed to this, then I'll support you however I can. But we do this smart. We prepare thoroughly. We have backup plans, and we make sure you're as ready as possible." The next 3 weeks became a whirlwind of preparation. Tom worked with them daily to create an arrangement that would showcase Kira's abilities while giving Emma opportunities to demonstrate her own musical skills. Dr. Martinez consulted on the therapeutic aspects of the performance, helping them choose a song that would have maximum positive impact on listeners. Father Rodriguez helped with translation and cultural context, making sure they could explain the meaning behind Kira's chosen song to an audience unfamiliar with melody traditions. Mrs. Chun organized a series of smaller practice performances at the community center, gradually increasing the size of the audience to help Kira build confidence. But it was Dr. Patel who provided perhaps the most valuable preparation. He introduced Kira to Dr. Jennifer Kim, a xenopsychologist who had extensive experience helping alien youth navigate cultural integration. Dr. Kim worked with Kira on techniques for managing performance anxiety and dealing with potential negative reactions. More importantly, she helped Kira understand the broader implications of what she was doing. "You're not just performing," Dr. Kim explained during one of their sessions. "You're educating. Most humans have never had the opportunity to experience authentic alien art. Their reactions will be based on ignorance and fear, not on any real understanding of what you're offering." "What if they hate it?" Kira asked. "Then you'll have learned something important about their limitations, not yours," Dr. Kim replied. "But I think you'll be surprised. Humans have a remarkable capacity for recognizing beauty when it's presented to them honestly and skillfully." As the date of the talent show approached, Marcus found himself dealing with his own anxiety. He'd become intensely protective of Kira over the past months, and the thought of her being hurt by ignorant or malicious audience members made his blood boil. His concern was shared by an unexpected source, Kira's father, Jorik. The older Melody had been working multiple jobs to keep them housed and fed, but he made time to attend their final practice session at the community center. Jorik was tall and thin like his daughter, with the same large purple eyes and blue-gray skin. His hands showed the wear of manual labor, and his translator was even older and more basic than Kira's. But when he heard his daughter sing, the pride and wonder on his face needed no translation. After the performance, Jorik approached Marcus with obvious emotion. "I must thank you," he said through his translator. "For months, I have watched my daughter become smaller, quieter, more afraid. I did not know how to help her remember who she was meant to be. She did the hard work herself," Marcus replied. "I just tried to give her a safe space to rediscover her confidence." Jorik shook his head. "No, it was more than safety. You saw value in her when she could not see it in herself. You gave her back her voice." The two fathers stood together watching their daughters discuss some detail of the upcoming performance, both girls animated and excited despite their nerves. "She has told me about the reactions at the hospital," Jorik continued. About the children who were healed by her songs. This is what our music was meant for, to heal, to bring peace, to connect souls across the barriers that separate us. Are you worried about tomorrow night? Marcus asked. Jorik was quiet for a moment. Yes, but I'm also hopeful. For the first time since we came to Earth, I believe my daughter might have a future here that honors who she truly is. The night before the talent show, Marcus lay awake thinking about everything that had led to this moment. A few months ago, he had been a struggling single father focused solely on making ends meet and keeping his daughter safe. Now he found himself at the center of what felt like a much larger story about acceptance, courage, and the transformative power of seeing past surface differences to recognize genuine beauty. He thought about Sarah and wondered what she would have made of the situation. She had always been better than him at seeing the bigger picture, at understanding how individual actions could ripple outward to create meaningful change. He suspected she would have been proud of Emma's determination to stand beside her friend, and proud of him for creating the conditions that allowed Kira's gifts to flourish. But mostly he thought about Kira herself, the frightened, desperate child who had walked into his shop asking for work, and the confident young artist who was now preparing to share her cultural heritage with a community that might or might not be ready to receive it. Tomorrow night would determine whether their faith in human capacity for growth and acceptance was justified. Marcus just hoped they had prepared well enough to handle whatever reaction they received. The Roosevelt Middle School auditorium buzzed with the nervous energy that always accompanied student performances. Parents filled the folding chairs, many checking their phones while waiting for the show to begin. Students clustered in groups, some excited about their own performances, others clearly dreading them. Marcus sat in the third row, position where Kira could easily see him if she needed reassurance. Jorik sat beside him, looking uncomfortable in his best clothes, but determined to support his daughter. Tom and Mrs. Chun had claimed seats nearby, along with Dr. Martinez and several other community members who had heard Kira sing over the past month. Backstage, Emma and Kira waited in the wings as act after act took the stage. There had been the usual mix of talent show performances, awkward magic tricks, off-key pop songs, a surprisingly good breakdancing routine, and a comedy sketch that had gotten a few laughs. "You're up in 3 acts," Mrs. Williams, the music teacher, informed them. She had been supportive throughout their preparation, though Marcus suspected she was nervous about potential audience reactions to Kira's performance. Emma squeezed her friend's hand. "Remember what Dr. Kim said. We're not performing for the people who won't understand. We're performing for the ones who will." Kira nodded, though her grip on her translator suggested she was fighting nerves. "I keep thinking about Miguel and the other children at the hospital. If this helps even one person, it will," Emma said firmly. "I know it will." The act before them finished to polite applause, and suddenly it was their turn. Emma walked out first, settling herself at the piano bench and adjusting the microphone. Kira followed, moving with the controlled grace Marcus had noticed she used when she was trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. The audience's reaction to Kira's appearance was immediate and mixed. Marcus could hear whispers rippling through the crowd, some curious, some skeptical, some openly hostile. A few people in the back made no effort to hide their displeasure at seeing an alien child on stage. "Good evening," Emma said in her microphone, her voice steady despite what Marcus knew were her own nerves. "I'm Emma Chun, and this is my friend Kira. Tonight we'd like to share something special with you. A traditional melody song that tells the story of finding home in an unexpected place." More whispers from the audience, though Marcus noticed that the front rows, mostly teachers and school staff, were listening attentively. "The song is called Roots in Foreign Soil," Emma continued, "and it's about how sometimes the most beautiful gardens grow when different seeds are planted together." Kira stepped forward, her translator in her hands, but her voice clear and unassisted. "This song was taught to me by my grandmother, who taught it to my mother, who taught it to me. It carries the voices of many generations, and Tonight, I share it with you as my gift to this community that has become our new home. Emma began playing a gentle, flowing melody that Tom had arranged to complement Kira's vocal range. For the first few measures, it was just piano, establishing the harmonic foundation that would support what was to come. Then, Kira began to sing. The effect was instantaneous and profound. The whispers stopped as if someone had thrown a switch. Even the hostile murmurs from the back rows faded to silence as Kira's voice filled the auditorium. She started quietly, her voice weaving through the melody like a stream finding its path through a forest. But as the song progressed, the true complexity of what she was doing became apparent. Harmonies layered upon harmonies, creating textures that shouldn't have been possible from a single voice. Marcus watched the audience's faces transform. Skepticism melted into wonder. Hostility gave way to awe. Parents who had been checking their phones sat transfixed. Children who had been fidgeting in their seats became perfectly still. The song itself told a story without words that any listener could understand. It spoke of loss and longing, of leaving everything familiar behind. It carried the pain of rejection, the fear of not belonging, the desperate hope for acceptance. And then, gradually, it began to change, incorporating new melodies that suggested growth, adaptation, and the gradual recognition that home could be found in the most unexpected places. As Kira's voice soared through the more complex passages, Emma provided a harmonic foundation that grounded the alien melodies in familiar human musical traditions. The collaboration was seamless, creating something that was neither purely human nor purely melody, but entirely beautiful. Dr. Martinez, sitting 2 rows ahead of Marcus, was openly crying. Tom had his eyes closed, following the musical progression with obvious professional appreciation. But it was the reactions of the children in the audience that struck Marcus most powerfully. A group of 8th graders who had been whispering and giggling throughout previous acts sat completely still, their faces showing the kind of wonder that Marcus associated with children seeing snow for the first time. Several younger kids had moved to the edge of their seats, as if trying to get closer to the source of the music. But perhaps most importantly, Marcus noticed several other alien children in the audience, Melody, Catherine, and species he didn't recognize, sitting up straighter, their faces showing something that looked like pride and recognition. As the song built toward its climax, Kira's voice began to demonstrate capabilities that defied human understanding of vocal anatomy. She produced bass notes that seemed to resonate in the building's structure while simultaneously maintaining crystal-clear soprano lines that danced above them. The harmonies became increasingly complex, creating the musical equivalent of a 3-dimensional sculpture made of sound. Emma's piano work became more intricate as well, weaving human musical traditions through the alien harmonic structure in ways that created bridges of understanding for listeners unfamiliar with melody music. The collaboration had become something greater than the sum of its parts, a true fusion that honored both musical traditions while creating something entirely new. When the song reached its resolution, Kira's voice gradually simplified, returning to the gentle, flowing melody with which it had begun. But now it carried echoes of everything that had come before, the pain and hope, the complexity and beauty, the journey from displacement to belonging. As the final notes faded, the auditorium fell into a silence so complete that Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. Kira and Emma stood on stage, holding hands, waiting for some kind of reaction. The applause, when it came, started slowly. A few scattered claps from the front rows, tentative and uncertain. Then more joined in, and more, until the entire auditorium erupted in sustained applause that went on for nearly 2 minutes. But it was more than just applause. People were standing, many openly crying. Marcus saw parents wiping tears from their eyes while their children clapped with the unconscious enthusiasm that only young people could muster. Several of the school's staff members were on their feet, applauding with the kind of vigor usually reserved for professional performances. When the applause finally died down, something unexpected happened. A voice from the audience called out, "More, please." Others joined in, and within moments the entire auditorium was chanting for an encore. Kira looked stunned, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. Emma grinned and whispered something to her friend, who nodded. "We didn't prepare an encore," Emma said in her microphone. "But if you'd like, Kira could sing something shorter. A traditional lullaby, maybe?" The enthusiastic response made it clear that this was exactly what the audience wanted. What Kira sang next was simpler than the first song, a gentle melody that her mother had sung to her as a child. But in the context of what the audience had just experienced, its simplicity felt profound rather than basic. It was like seeing a master painter create something beautiful with just a few perfect brush strokes. The lullaby lasted only about 3 minutes, but its effect on the audience was even more powerful than the first song. Marcus watched as parents instinctively reached for their children's hands. He saw teachers exchanging looks of wonder and recognition. Most importantly, he saw the other alien children in the audience sitting taller, their faces showing a pride and confidence he suspected they rarely felt in public settings. When the lullaby ended, the standing ovation was immediate and sustained. But now it came with something more: genuine affection. Marcus could hear people calling out "beautiful" and "amazing" and "thank you." As Kira and Emma took their bows and left the stage, Marcus felt a profound sense of vindication. They had been right to believe in the power of authentic art to bridge cultural divides. They had been right to trust that beauty, honestly presented, could overcome prejudice and fear. The rest of the talent show continued, but nothing could match what had just happened. The performances that followed were received politely, but there was a sense that everyone in the auditorium was still processing what they had just experienced. Afterward, as parents and students mingled in the lobby, Marcus watched Kira and Emma being approached by dozens of people wanting to express their appreciation. Children asked questions about melody culture. Parents thanked her for sharing something so beautiful with their families. Even some of the people Marcus had seen whispering skeptically during her introduction approached to offer genuine compliments. But it was the reaction of the other alien students that moved Marcus most deeply. A young Kethran boy approached Kira shyly, speaking to her in halting English about how proud her performance had made him feel. A group of melody teenagers, looking like they could hardly believe what had just happened, clustered around her, speaking rapidly in their native language. Dr. Williams, the music teacher, pulled Marcus aside as the crowd began to thin. "I need you to know," she said, "that what happened here tonight was extraordinary. In 20 years of teaching, I've never seen a performance have that kind of impact on an audience. The requests have already started. People want to know if Kira would be willing to perform at other events, to teach workshops, to share more of her culture with the community." Marcus looked over at Kira, who was animatedly discussing something with Emma, while Jork stood nearby, his face showing a pride so profound it was almost painful to witness. "I think she might be ready for that," Marcus said. "A few months ago, she was afraid to let anyone hear her voice. Tonight, she shared her heart with hundreds of strangers and watched them respond with love instead of rejection." Mrs. Williams nodded. "What you and Emma did for her, creating the conditions for her to rediscover her confidence, that's going to ripple outward in ways you probably can't imagine yet." Every alien child in that audience tonight saw that it's possible to be celebrated for who they are, not just tolerated. As they drove home that night, Emma chattered excitedly about the performance and the reactions, but Kira was unusually quiet. When Marcus asked if she was okay, she looked out the window at the city lights flowing past. "I keep thinking about something my mother told me," she said finally. "She said that the purpose of art is not to make people comfortable, but to make them more human." Tonight, I think I understand what she meant. "How so?" "When I started singing, I could see the fear and suspicion in people's faces. They saw me as alien, as other, as something to be wary of. But by the end," she paused, searching for the right words. By the end, they were seeing me as someone who could feel pain and hope and love just like them. The music didn't make me less alien. It made them more willing to recognize our shared humanity. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. In just a few months, this remarkable girl had gone from being afraid of her own voice to understanding its power to transform not just herself, but everyone who heard it. So what happens now? Emma asked. Are you going to keep performing? Kira smiled, the first completely uninhibited smile Marcus had seen from her. Yes, I think I am. Dr. Martinez wants to expand a hospital program. Mrs. Williams mentioned other schools that might be interested. And there's something else. She paused dramatically, clearly enjoying having their full attention. Father Rodriguez told me tonight that the university's Xenocultural Studies department wants to document melody musical traditions. They want to work with me to preserve our songs and teach others about their cultural significance. Marcus felt a surge of pride, so intense it almost took his breath away. This child who had walked into his shop months ago asking for work had become someone who would help preserve and share her people's cultural heritage with the wider world. That sounds like important work, he said. It is, Kira agreed. And it's work that needs to be done not just for my people, but for all the refugee communities here. Tonight showed me that humans are ready to appreciate alien cultures. They just need opportunities to experience them authentically. As they pulled into the driveway of their apartment building, Marcus realized that what had started as a simple act of compassion, giving a desperate child some work and a warm meal, had become something much larger. Kira's journey from fear to confidence had created ripples that were already transforming their entire community's understanding of what it meant to be human in an increasingly diverse galaxy. Looking at these two remarkable young people, Marcus felt hopeful about the future in a way he hadn't since Sarah's death. If children could overcome prejudice and fear through the simple act of sharing their authentic selves, maybe there was hope for the adults too. The universe, as Kira's mother had said, needed all the light it could get. Tonight, his daughter and her friend had made it significantly brighter.